I began sleeping with my husband's father the same week I found out I was pregnant. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking right now. But before you judge me, before you click away and decide I'm just another terrible person, let me tell you something. I didn't plan this. Nobody wakes up and chooses to destroy everything. It happens slowly, then all at once. And by the time you realize what you've done, you're already standing in the ashes. My name is Claire, and for 8 years I was married to David. Good marriage. Normal marriage. The kind where you meal prep on Sundays and argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. We lived in a modest house in Portland, the kind of neighborhood where people actually wave at each other. David worked in accounting. I taught kindergarten. We were trying for a baby. His father, Richard, had been living alone since David's mother passed 3 years earlier. Cancer. It was brutal and fast, and it hollowed Richard out in ways I didn't fully understand until later. He was 65, still handsome in that weathered way, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. David asked if his dad could move into our guest house out back. Just temporarily, he said, until Richard got back on his feet emotionally. I said yes because that's what you do. You help family. Richard moved in on a Tuesday in March. He kept to himself mostly, spent his days reading in the guest house or taking long walks around the neighborhood. Sometimes I'd bring him dinner, and we'd talk on his small porch. He told me about his marriage, about watching his wife fade away, about the specific torture of loving someone you can't save. I listened. David was always working late during tax season, and honestly, I was lonely too. The conversations became longer, deeper. He'd ask about my day with the kids, really ask, like he cared about the tiny details. When I talked about wanting to be a mother, about the failed pregnancy tests month after month, he didn't give me the usual platitudes. He just said, the waiting is its own kind of grief. Nobody had ever put it that way before. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button because what happened next changed everything. And I need you to understand how it started before you understand how it ended. It was late April when I took a pregnancy test and saw 2 lines. I stared at it in the bathroom for 10 minutes, crying, shaking, overwhelmed with relief and joy. David was out of town for a conference. I wanted to tell someone, to share this moment, and Richard was right there in the backyard, reading on his porch in the evening light. I walked over with the test still in my hand. When I told him, his face transformed. He stood up and hugged me, and I let myself sink into it because I needed someone to hold me while I fell apart with happiness. The hug lasted too long. When he pulled back, his hand stayed on my arms, and he looked at me in a way that made my stomach drop. "You're going to be an incredible mother," he whispered. That should have been the end of it. A sweet moment. But his thumbs were moving in small circles on my skin, and neither of us stepped away. "Richard," I said, and I don't even know what I meant by it. A warning. A question. "I know," he said. "I know." But he didn't move, and neither did I. We stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds, and then I turned and walked back to the house with my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. I locked myself in the bedroom and tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, the electricity, the danger hovering in the air between us. I hadn't imagined it. David came home the next day, and I told him about the baby. He lifted me up and spun me around and called his father to share the news, and Richard came over and congratulated us both with a smile that looked almost painful. That night, after David fell asleep, I got a text from Richard. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. It won't happen again." I should have left it there. I should have said, "It's okay. Let's forget it." Instead, I wrote back, "You didn't make me uncomfortable." I watched those 3 dots appear and disappear for 5 minutes before his response came. That's what I'm afraid of. I need you to understand something. I loved my husband. I wanted our baby. I had everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed about. But there was something about Richard, about the way he saw me, that felt like being known in a way I'd never experienced. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. The texts continued. Never anything explicit, just conversation that felt too intimate, too charged. We'd talk late at night when David was asleep. About life, about loss, about all the things we couldn't say out loud. And every time I saw Richard in person, the air felt thinner, harder to breathe. If you're wondering how far this went, stay with me, because I'm about to tell you about the moment I can never take back. It was mid-May, around 10 in the evening. David was at the office finishing a project. I was 8 weeks pregnant and exhausted, lying on the couch watching TV. Richard knocked on the back door. He'd locked himself out of the guest house and needed the spare key. I let him in. We stood in the kitchen, and the key was right there on the hook by the door, but neither of us moved toward it. The silence stretched out, heavy and deliberate. "This is wrong," I said. "I know. You're his father. I know. I'm pregnant with your grandchild. I know." And then he kissed me. I kissed him back. It wasn't rough or desperate. It was slow and devastating and felt like every wrong decision I'd ever avoided making finally catching up to me all at once. When we pulled apart, I was crying. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I know," he said again. "Neither can I." But we did. Over the next month, we created a separate reality. When David was at work, Richard would come to the house, and we'd talk and touch and cross lines we both knew were uncrossable. We didn't have sex, not technically, but we did everything else. Every time felt like the last time. Every time wasn't. I told myself I'd stop after the first trimester, after the second, after the baby was born. I told myself 1,000 lies because the truth was too ugly to look at directly. My pregnancy progressed. David was attentive and excited. Richard attended appointments with us like a doting grandfather-to-be. I smiled through baby showers and doctor visits while carrying this massive secret that was slowly crushing me from the inside out. The guilt was constant, but so was the pull toward Richard. It was like living two completely separate lives in the same body, and I didn't know who I was anymore. And then, at 32 weeks pregnant, David's sister Emma came to visit. Hit that like button if you're feeling your stomach drop right now, because mine did too when I realized what was about to happen. Emma stayed with us for the weekend. She was organizing old family photos in the living room on Saturday afternoon while I made lunch. David was at the hardware store. Richard was in the guest house. Everything was fine until Emma called me over. "Claire, can you help me figure out when this was taken?" I walked over, drying my hands on a dish towel. She was holding a photo of Richard and David's mother from maybe 30 years ago. They were young and happy, and standing in front of a lake house I recognized from other pictures. "That's Lake Oswego," I said. "David mentioned they used to vacation there." Emma nodded, then pulled out her phone. "Dad's been texting me a lot lately, more than usual. I think he's lonely." She showed me the screen. "Look at this one from yesterday." The text said, "Some mistakes feel less like mistakes and more like inevitabilities. How do you live with that?" My blood went cold. "That's kind of dark," Emma said, frowning. "Do you think he's okay?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move, because I knew exactly what that text meant, and I knew Emma was maybe 3 questions away from figuring it out too. "Claire, you okay?" "Yeah," I managed. "Just Braxton Hicks. I'm gonna sit down." I left the room before she could see my face. I texted Richard immediately. "Your daughter is here looking at your texts. Be careful." His response came fast. "I know. We need to end this." But ending it and being able to end it are 2 different things. That evening, all 4 of us had dinner together. Emma, David, Richard, and me, sitting around the table like a normal family. Emma kept watching her father with concern, asking if he was sleeping okay, if he wanted to talk. Richard deflected gracefully, but I could see the strain in his jaw, the way his hands gripped his fork too tightly. After dinner, David and Emma went to walk the dog. Richard and I were alone in the kitchen washing dishes. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "She's going to figure it out," I finally said. "No, she won't. There's nothing to figure out." "Richard?" "There's nothing to figure out," he repeated harder this time. "Because it's over. It has to be over." I felt something crack open in my chest. "I know. Do you?" He turned to face me and his eyes were desperate. Because I don't think you do. I don't think either of us does. We keep saying it's over and then don't. I put my hand on his chest, and I meant it as a barrier, a way to keep him at a distance, but we both knew better. Please don't. He covered my hand with his. When you have this baby, when you're holding David's child, our grandchild, are you going to be able to look at me? I don't know. That's what I thought. The back door opened. We jumped apart just as David and Emma came in with the dog. Emma looked between us, and something flickered across her face. Suspicion, confusion. I couldn't tell. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to David with his hand on my belly, feeling the baby kick, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life was about to implode. It was just a matter of when. The answer came 2 weeks later. I was 34 weeks pregnant. David was at work. I was in the nursery painting the walls a soft yellow when my phone rang. Emma. Claire, I need you to tell me the truth about something. My hand froze mid-brush stroke. What? Is something going on with my father? What do you mean? I mean, I've been thinking about that weekend. The way he looked at you, the way you looked at him. Claire, I'm not stupid. Subscribe right now if you want to know how I answered that question. Because the truth is, I don't remember what I said. My brain shut down. I think I denied it. I think I said she was imagining things. I think I cried. What I know for sure is that when I hung up, I called Richard immediately. Emma knows, I said. She doesn't know. She suspects. What's the difference? The difference is proof. She doesn't have any. Yet. There was a long silence. What do you want me to do, Claire? I want you to tell me how to undo this. I want you to tell me how to go back to March and not let you move in. I want you to tell me how to not be this person. I can't do that. I know. I was crying now, sitting on the floor of the nursery surrounded by paint cans and stuffed animals. I know you can't. I love you, he said, and it was the first time either of us had said it out loud. I hung up without responding. That night, David came home and found me still sitting on the nursery floor. He thought I was overwhelmed with pregnancy hormones and nesting anxiety. He held me while I cried, and I let him, because what else could I do? He had no idea he was comforting me over the affair with his own father. The next month passed in a blur of mounting dread. Emma stopped texting me. She stopped visiting. Richard withdrew into the guest house and we barely spoke. David noticed the tension but attributed it to pre-baby stress. I let him believe it. I gave birth to our daughter on a Wednesday in July. 9 pounds, healthy, perfect. They placed her on my chest, and I looked into her brand new face and thought, I brought you into this, into all of this. Richard came to the hospital with flowers and a card that said, "Congratulations to the new grandparents." He held our daughter and smiled for photos, and when David left the room to make calls, Richard looked at me and whispered, "She's beautiful. You did so well." And I hated him in that moment. Hated him for making this so complicated, for being so gentle, for looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered while we stood in the wreckage we'd created together. We brought the baby home, and for 2 weeks everything seemed almost normal. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, the exhausting, beautiful chaos of new parenthood. Richard helped when we needed it, but kept his distance. I thought maybe we'd gotten away with it. Maybe Emma had been wrong. Maybe we could all just move forward and pretend it never happened. And then one evening in August, David came home early from work and asked to talk. Comment below if you've ever had a conversation you knew would end your life as you knew it. Because I looked at my husband's face and knew this was it. We sat at the kitchen table. The baby was asleep. Richard was in the guest house. Everything was quiet except for the sound of my heart trying to escape my chest. Emma called me today, David said. His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. She said some things I need you to help me understand. What things? She said she thinks you and my father are having an affair. There it was, the bomb, finally dropped. That's insane, I said, and my voice sounded hollow even to me. That's what I said. David was watching me carefully. I told her she was crazy, that there was no way, that she was seeing things that weren't there. He paused. Tell me she's seeing things that aren't there, Claire. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Claire, tell me. I could have lied. I could have denied it, gaslit Emma, made David believe his sister was unstable. I could have saved everything with a single word. No. Instead, I started crying. David's face changed. The color drained out of it. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Oh my God. David, oh my God. Tell me she's wrong. Please tell me she's wrong. I'm sorry. No, that's not, you didn't, my father? My father? He was yelling now, and I heard the guest house door open, footsteps on gravel. Richard appeared in the doorway, and the look on his face told me he knew exactly what was happening. Get out, David said to him. His voice was shaking. Get out of my house. David, let me explain. Explain? David's voice cracked. What is there to explain? You slept with my pregnant wife? That's what there is to explain? It wasn't. Richard looked at me desperately, and I realized we'd never actually discussed what to say if this moment came. We'd been so focused on avoiding it that we never planned for it. How long? David asked me. How long has this been going on? Since April. April. So the entire pregnancy. You were fucking my father while carrying my child. We didn't have sex, I said, which was technically true and completely meaningless. Don't! David's hands were in fists at his sides. Don't you dare parse the definition of cheating with me right now. Did you touch him? Silence. Did he touch you? More silence. Get out! David screamed at Richard. Get out before I do something we'll both regret. Richard looked at me one more time, and I saw everything we'd never said to each other pass between us in that look. Then he walked out. I heard his truck start, heard gravel spray as he drove away. David turned to me. I want you out too. David, please. You don't get to please me. You don't get to cry. You did this. You and my father, you both did this. His voice broke. While you were pregnant. While we were building our life. While I was buying baby furniture and painting the nursery. You were with him. I'm so sorry. Do you love him? It was the one question I couldn't answer. Because yes, somehow, impossibly, I did. And no, because what Richard and I had wasn't love. It was something darker and more complicated and more destructive. I don't know, I whispered. That was the wrong answer. David told me to pack a bag and leave. I begged him to let me stay, to think about our daughter, to give me a chance to explain. He just kept saying, my father, my father, my father, like he couldn't believe it. Like if he said it enough times, it would stop being true. I left that night with a 2-week-old baby and nowhere to go. I called Richard. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I ended up at a hotel, sitting on a scratchy bedspread with my daughter asleep in a travel bassinet, wondering how I'd destroyed my entire life in 4 months. The next day, David filed for divorce. His lawyer contacted me with a message. If I fought for custody, he would make sure everyone knew what I'd done. He would tell the school where I worked. He would tell our families. He would make me radioactive. I didn't fight. Richard never called me back. I found out later that Emma had gone to see him, that she'd told him if he ever contacted me again, she'd make sure David pressed charges for something, anything they could make stick. Richard had agreed. He'd just vanished from my life like he'd never been there at all. I lost my job when word got out. Small town, big scandal. The kindergarten teacher who slept with her father-in-law. It spread like wildfire. Parents complained. The school board let me go. I moved to Seattle to start over. David got primary custody. I see our daughter every other weekend, and every time I drop her off, I see the door to the guest house, still there, still empty. And I think about the version of my life where I never brought Richard dinner that first night, where I kept my distance, where I made different choices, I haven't spoken to Richard in 2 years. I don't know where he is or what he's doing. Sometimes I still get the urge to text him, to ask if he thinks about it too, if he lies awake at night wondering how we let it happen. But I never do. Because what would be the point? Here's what I've learned. You can't undo this kind of damage. You can't apologize it away or explain it into making sense. Some mistakes are permanent. They change the shape of your life forever, and all you can do is learn to live in the new shape. My daughter is 2 now. She's beautiful and smart, and has David's smile. Sometimes when I'm with her, I forget for a moment what I did. And then I remember, and the guilt crashes over me again, fresh as the day David found out. People ask me if I regret it. The honest answer is, I don't know how to regret something that felt so inevitable. From the moment Richard moved in, from that first long conversation on his porch, it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You can see it coming, but you can't make yourself look away. And you definitely can't stop it. Would I do it differently if I could go back? Yes, obviously. But that's not the same as regret. Because part of me, some small, terrible part, still remembers what it felt like to be seen that way, to be wanted that way. And I hate that I remember. I hate that I can't fully regret the thing that cost me everything. So here I am, 2 years later, telling my story to strangers on the internet. Not because I want sympathy. I know I don't deserve it. But because I needed someone to know the whole truth. Not the version David tells, or the version Emma whispers at family gatherings. The real version? The complicated, ugly, human version. If you made it this far, drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever made a choice you knew was wrong but couldn't stop yourself from making? Have you ever watched your life fall apart and felt like you were both the cause and the victim? I'm still trying to figure out how to live with what I did. How to be a good mother to a child I brought into chaos. How to look at myself in the mirror without seeing the worst version of me staring back. The hardest part isn't the judgment or the consequences. It's knowing that somewhere out there, Richard is asking himself the same questions, and we'll never get to ask them together. Thanks for listening. Thanks for not clicking away. And if you're going through something similar, something you can't tell anyone, I see you. I know what it's like to carry something so heavy it threatens to crush you. Hit subscribe if you want more of these stories. Real confessions from real people who made real mistakes. Because we're all just trying to figure out how to be human. And sometimes we fail spectacularly. I'm Claire. And this is what happened when I crossed a line I can never uncross.